Christian parenting.
Winter is here. For some of you, this year has flown by, and for others, it's probably felt like an eternity. We've been through it as parents in 2020, haven't we? We have walked through some really hard things with our families in this unnerving year: pandemics, school closures, economic uncertainty, more screen time than ever, leaving us with our normal all turned upside down. Anyone else exhausted? I need some rest, some answers, some encouragement in your parenting journey. And that's why Tara and I hosted our podcast, the Living Wholehearted podcast with Jeff and Tara.
Remember, is it episode 47? It still encourages me as I think of the words from John Mark Comer as he talked about burnout and just the heaviness and how to slow down and to live an unhurried life. Maybe for you as a listener, there's other shows that you remember from this year that were meaningful to you. Well, these episodes are all made possible because of our partnership with ChristianParenting.org. Christian Parenting is an online resource that offers practical help and biblical encouragement through podcasts like this one for parents like you and leaders like you. They help produce podcasts in Christian Parenting Podcast Network, develop parenting books and workbooks, and support the production and creation of the Living Wholehearted podcast. So today we're asking for your help in leading parents to the true source of their parenting strength, Jesus. Christian Parenting is 100% donor-funded and relies on listeners like you to support the future creation of parenting resources. And if you've been enjoying our show, would you make a donation to Christian Parenting today?
And when you give today at www.cpgive.org, your gift will be doubled thanks to a generous donor stepping forward with a $10,000 matching grant. That means your $20 donation becomes $40 or your $50 donation becomes $100. All donations go to impacting parents walking through the same things as you.
All parents need a trusted community. All parents need a reminder that it's okay to be imperfect. All parents need Jesus. And as parents come to know and love Jesus more, so do their kids. So please give today at cpgive.org. And thank you so much for your generosity.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We are Jeff and Tara Matson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Tara is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace. Stories of hope in the midst of darkness. And there's just been so much trauma and loss this year. As we head into the holidays, we wanted to bring you a resource on how to grieve well during a time where we often forget those who are hurting. Stan and Lori Thomas have been married 40 years. They live outside Eugene, Oregon, and have a ministry, Hope for Grief. In ministry for 18 years, they are now in the mortgage industry, and they faced one of the most tragic moments in their lives when they lost their teen daughter, Aimee Brooke Thomas. Today, they spend time coming alongside of other families who have lost a child, and they want to bring hope to anyone who is grieving a loved one today. Thank you for being part of the show today, Stan and Lori.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you and to be a part of your Living Wholehearted. We love it.
Thank you, Stan. Well, let's start a little bit about you telling us about where you guys are in life today, what life looks like for you here and now, and maybe then you can even also tell us how you two met.
Sure. Well, we met in Bible college in Santa Cruz, California. First day of school, I saw her, and for me, it was love at first sight. It took a while for her. But, before that, I had it all planned out. I would wait until my senior year in school and then get married. We got married the next summer, and by the time I graduated with a bachelor's in science and pastoral ministries, we had 2 children. You know, our plans are not always his plans, that's for sure. Then we started pastoring, and within a couple more years, we had twins. So our family was made up of our eldest daughter, our son, and then twin girls, Ashley and Aimee. The next 18 years I spent in pastoral ministry with a short break to work on a master's degree at Western Evangelical Seminary, which is now part of George Fox. It wasn't long after that, though, that we discovered God was calling me in a different direction. And I've now been a mortgage broker for 21 years. And I help people make their dreams come true and solve their financial problems. Today, we have the 4 children I mentioned, 9 grandchildren. The oldest is our 6'5" gentle giant, Preston. He turned 15 yesterday. Yeah, 6'5". The youngest is our 4-month-old bundle of joy, Trust Hosanna. We are so thankful for all that God has given us in our family.
What an amazing journey from Bible college all the way to all of these grandkids. And I love how you said, Stan, that you help people with their dreams, finding their dream home, and with their financial problems too. And that is an incredible ministry. So thank you for what you're doing. And it is neat to see how God uses all of who we are. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you lost Aimee? I think you lost her in 2013, if that's correct. And just to tell our audience the story, and then we'll dive in a little bit more of what grief had looked like at the time.
So a little bit of background about Aimee. Stan mentioned that, she's a twin, the youngest of the twins. It took, Ashley I had pretty quick, and then it took 2 more hours for Aimee. And that was kind of Aimee. That was kind of how Aimee was. She was never really in a hurry. She really lived in the moment and was just never in a hurry. And that's kind of how she came into this world. We, like you said, we have our older children. Nicole lives in Idaho, and then Daniel and Ashley are here. And Aimee, they were all married at the time we lost Aimee. Aimee was just kind of a late bloomer, and we had property, a ranch in Veneta, Oregon, and she still lived. Well, we had an extra house on the property, and that's where Aimee lived. And she was an amazing horse trainer, kind of like the horse whisperer type, just very gentle. Horses trusted her, her clients trusted her. Just an amazing young woman. And I also worked with Aimee. We worked together in the barn. I trained young girls how to ride, and she trained horses. And so we had this amazing business together. We also had a grief ministry that Aimee came up with. It was called Halo at the time. And we helped young girls who had lost a parent to a death. And so Aimee and I were very involved with that. I am a performer. I'm a singer-songwriter, so I do music on the weekends. And so it was a Sunday night. Aimee and her fiance, she had just, gotten engaged shortly before we lost her. And I was performing on a Sunday night, and Aimee was with her fiance, and his relatives just flew in from Indiana on that Sunday night to meet Aimee for the first time. So she was very excited to do that. So that Sunday night, we had our crowd watching me, and then Aimee was with her fiance and family. And so that was the last time we really got to see her, was that Sunday night. Monday morning, we wake up to a phone call saying Aimee never made it to work. And just that motherly instinct, I knew in that moment, it wasn't like I was thinking, oh, she probably stopped for coffee. I knew something was wrong. It wasn't like Aimee to be late. She was always excited to go wherever it was she was going, and got there on time. And so that, definitely sent a signal to me. I ran into the bedroom and told Stan something was really wrong. This was about 7 a.m, very foggy morning, Monday morning, the 25th of November. And I said, Aimee's gone. I just knew something horrible had happened. And he kept saying, why, where is she? And I said, she's just gone. And we were in our pajamas, got in the car, went, about 10 houses down from our street. And then there's this highway. That's a very busy highway. And 10 houses down, we came to a stop sign, and we saw all the sirens traffic backed up for miles and saw Aimee's car in a ditch with a semi-truck on top of her car.
Hmm.
And we sat there in that moment. And it's interesting what happens, because my brain kept telling me that is not Aimee's car, because I didn't want it to be Aimee's car. And yet I knew her car very, very well. So, but it was just in that moment of shock that my brain wasn't wanting me to believe that. And so we pulled over. There was a convenience store right there. We pulled over and I jumped out of the car before we even parked and ran to a policeman and asked if our daughter was still in the car. And he said, no, but you'll want to get there quickly because it's very critical. So, as you can imagine, that was a very long drive, even though it really wasn't a long drive, but it just felt like we were kind of suspended in time to see, to get to our daughter and see what was going on. And so that's where I made my many phone calls along the way for people to pray and trying to get a hold of her fiance to tell him what was happening. And then, we arrived to emergency, and that is where they told us that she didn't make it. And, to hear someone say that to you, it's just like words that won't even set into your brain. It's like she said it a couple times. The chaplain came out actually, and she said it a couple of times, and it's like our brains just wouldn't accept that information. It's a very weird, for people that lost a child that are listening, they know what I'm talking about. It's just like, it's news you do not want to hear. And so your body keeps telling you this is not truth, this is not really happening, but it happened. So
It did. And it takes a long while for that reality to set
mhm,
in. The
mhm,
shock, I can imagine, just the foggy shock, a literal worst nightmare
absolutely.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about how that grief unfolded. So that initial, feeling like this couldn't be real to when it
Hmm.
does set in and it is real. What did
Hmm.
that first year look like for you guys as your parents who have to face the reality that you've lost your daughter to a car accident? What did you need most in those early years, or even let's just talk about those few months? What did you need then?
One of the things that we found out right away was that you can be married to somebody for a long time and know them very well and go through a very traumatic event, and both of you can change.
Hmm.
Uh, Grief can chemically make a change in your body, just the heartache of it. We grieve differently. So, one of the things that became so frustrating and obvious to us was that we were grieving the very same thing, the very same person, but we were doing it differently. And how to bridge that was a 4-year journey, basically, for us. So I had written down, as I knew we were going to talk about this, the truth is that when this happened, I was in shock for a pretty long period of time. We literally had no idea how to be prepared for the loss of a child. We now call it an out of sequence loss. When your parents die, you kind of expect that as they get older, that's acceptable, that's normal. But when your child dies before you, that's not normal.
Hmm.
That's not the way things are supposed to go. From the moment we pulled up to the accident scene, our lives would be forever altered. Neither of us had any idea how to deal with things that we thought we understood. As a pastor in the past, I had been in hospital rooms with parents, actually,
Hmm.
when their child was dying, and I had thought I had comforted them or tried to, but I had no idea what that sadness was really like. And Lori and I now dealt with PTSD because we rolled up on the accident scene, and that had a pretty long effect on us. In a little
Mm.
while, I'll share a little bit about depression, but whereas Lori wanted to do things and did do things, I wanted to isolate, be alone. I got severely depressed. I found out what a panic attack was for the first time. I had no idea. In my mind, we had a perfect life. We had all the things that we thought we wanted. We were headed in the direction that we planned to go in. And in a moment, in an instant, it was like a grenade went off in our life, and it was really blown apart. So it was very devastating to us.
I think you asked the question what we needed. And, truth is, when you're in shock like that, when you're grieving, you don't really know. I mean, of course, we needed things, but you don't know what you need because you're not really in touch with yourself for a while. We're still trying to figure out if this really even happened. So I remember at Aimee's service, we had people hugging us and then walking away and saying these words: "If you need us, call us." I thought about that. First of all, when we got home, as days and weeks went on, I couldn't remember who even said that at the service to even call anybody, because I didn't really feel like I was, really there at the service. So I think that is one thing that we talk to people who ask us the question, how can I help my friend who's grieving? And we always just say, just do it. Just do, whether it's mow their lawn or shop for them or drop a meal off to them, just do it, and don't really ask what it is they need, because grievers really don't know. We're not thinking about our meals. We're not thinking about shopping. And so, for us, I'm really thankful that we had those people that saw us struggling. And when Aimee died, I mean, we had a really heavy snowstorm shortly after that. And so on that, nobody wanted to drive that highway, so, but, we had some friends that knew that we were struggling and kind of out in the country when it was snowing, and they came in and they did those things for us. They cleaned our stalls, which was a huge physical undertaking. We had 17 horses at that time, and Aimee
Mm.
normally did that job. And so it was funny because our friends, they're afraid of horses. They don't know what they're doing, and bless their hearts, they came in with their pitchforks and all gloved up and with their mucking boots
Rubber
on,
boots, yeah.
rubber
Yeah.
boots. They bought all this stuff just to come and do those things. And it was such a blessing because they didn't ask. They told us, we're coming tomorrow. And we wouldn't have thought of that. We wouldn't have thought to have even have shopped or made our meals. That's just not where our brain was at. We were still trying to wrap our head around, did this even happen? Is this a bad dream? And we're going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to walk in the barn and Aimee's going to really be there. And so I think that's really important for listeners to kind of take in, is when, especially during the holidays, just do what you feel that person would love, whatever that looks like, rather than to ask, because we don't, even this far out, 7 years later, we probably still really wouldn't know what to ask because we just kind of do it ourselves. But when that person does come along and send us that gift certificate for a dinner, or whatever that may look like, it is such a blessing to receive that.
Mm. So good and important clarity. And I think you're talking about two layers. You're talking about grief, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Losing a child out of order, kind of loss you're talking about, Stan, is a traumatic thing. And then you definitely were dealing with long-term PTSD as well. And so yeah, for those who are coming alongside others, that's really important feedback to just say, just do it, instead of asking, what do you need? Because you're right. You don't know at that time, and you won't know for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, Now, most couples, sadly, don't make it when they lose a child. The loss of a child is one of the most hard things on a marriage. So, talk a little bit about your marriage and how you two did make it through. Here you are 13 years later, or actually only 7 years
7.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah, only
This will be
7
our
years
7th.
later. But that is still significant. So talk about that. How have you guys made it in your marriage?
I think that probably those first 4 years, I didn't really take care of my own grief because I was having high anxiety issues, but Stan was really depressed, and that was a husband I did not know. He's always been optimistic, the glass is full and overflowing, kind of a guy, and to see him get up, and there were days that I would look. He's a high functioning, person. So he loves what he does. He loves his work. But I would look in his office and the screen on the computer would be dark. He would not even have turned it on and he'd just be sitting there staring at it. So it was a very dark and scary time. And so I think I put my grief on hold to make sure he was okay. I was, afraid to go shopping. Sometimes I would call one of our kids just to come and be in the house with them, because I was just afraid to even leave him alone. So looking back, I would say that probably wasn't the healthiest thing for me to do, because what happened come year 4, is when I feel like he kind of started doing a little bit better. He had started seeing a counselor at that point. And so as he was doing better, all of a sudden, I started to crash, because that's when I saw he was okay, he was getting help. And then I just started to unravel because I didn't take care of my grief as I should have from day one. I made sure the kids were okay. I made sure my husband was okay, and then I took care of my grief last. I think that's when we really hit the wall in our marriage, because I felt like I didn't know him. He felt like he didn't know me. There was a huge communication breakdown, and that was a really scary time. And I remember sitting at our kitchen table just saying, I don't know if this is going to work. I remember saying, I can see why people fall apart in their
Mm-hmm.
marriage when they lose a child, because this is hard. And I don't want this to be hard for you. I don't want it to be hard for me. I don't know if it's just better that we just don't do this anymore, and I just didn't really know. It was very weird words to come out of my mouth, because I very much wanted to, I love my husband and very much wanted to make it work. But I think because I put my grief on hold, all of a sudden it just seemed very overwhelming to now deal with an entire marriage that I feel like we were almost strangers, because people really do grieve very, very differently. And so I needed to talk about Aimee, and he would fall apart if he heard Aimee's name, but I really needed to make her alive in me, just to keep her memory alive in me. But that was very, very hard for him. So just differences like that made it very difficult, in communication. So I would say counseling. I ended up going to counseling as well. And then we would come together once a month and do marriage counseling. And that's where we learned the tools on how to communicate, with a loss. And between our faith, faith being the number one, I know that the Lord had a greater plan for us. But finding a counselor that knew how to make us work together, I think was really key, as well.
Mm.
As Lori talked about that meeting at the kitchen table, I remember that meeting very well. And I was the kind of guy. I'm the kind of guy that likes to fix problems. And the issue for grief is, especially for the loss of a child, you can't fix it. It's not a math equation. It's not fixable. You're going to have to live with it. And that really it made a hole in my heart, if you will. And so when I tried to get back up going again, it would never last. And finally, for all the macho men out there that think they can solve it themselves, finally, my wife and our doctor convinced me that I should probably be on some medication. And I know the medication doesn't work as fast as the relief I felt when I gave into that and said, yeah, I should take something. and they put me on an antidepressant, and things really turned around. I started having some energy again. I had a little bit of creativity again. And when you lose someone that's such a part of your life, you may feel like you'll never be happy again. You'll never be excited about anything again. That doesn't have to be your reality. And as I listened to my wife and realized I didn't want to lose my marriage, I decided I had to try something different. And so I was willing to see a doctor, get on some medication, and that was really kind of the beginning for me of getting better. And it was really kind of the opening Pandora's box for Lori so that she could grieve again.
I so appreciate both your honesty and vulnerability and just recognizing, the honesty, Lori, of just saying, yeah, I don't know if this marriage is going to work in the midst of the grief, but recognizing that that wasn't your deepest desire. And Stan, the difficulty it is for us to admit that medication can help and a counselor, and but recognizing that grief and trauma does affect the brain chemistry, as you said earlier, and so that is a fact, and it isn't a weakness or something we can outpower or fix. And appreciate those who are listening, just being able to hear where you're at and what that hurdle is of receiving help that's needed. Particularly this time of year, everybody going around saying it's the most wonderful time of the year. And in fact, many people started celebrating Christmas early because it just changes our brain chemistry. It helps us feel better. So, a lot of Christmas trees are up, well into October, I even saw. So I'm wondering how you two have made it through the holidays, and what are some of the practical things that you have done outside of counseling and medication that has really helped you move through your grief as each holiday hits, and particularly because you did lose Aimee around the holidays. So I can imagine this time of year really brings up a lot of memories. Speak to that a bit.
So one thing that we decided to do was just always to bring our daughter into the season. And that really does help. They may not be there physically, but I think just to put out that little bit of extra effort to make sure that she's remembered is so very important. And so one of the things that we did last year, we kind of do something different every year, but Aimee loved spaghetti. She loved spaghetti. And so last November, on the day that we lost her on the 25th, we had posted on Facebook that spaghetti was Aimee's favorite dinner. And so we did a little hashtag so that people would also make a spaghetti dinner, take a picture of it, and then post it. And so those pictures all came to us. And it was people that we didn't know, because as those people would post, it would go out to their people. And that was such a blessing to just know at the most difficult time of the year for us that other people were joining us and remembering Aimee. So I would say things that people could do for Thanksgiving is to make that favorite side dish or that favorite meal or dessert that their child, loved or their loved one enjoyed. I always make sure that I sent cards out knowing that, for some people, holidays is just a sad time. Things aren't what they used to be. And so they hear the Christmas music in the mall and it makes them sad instead of make them happy. So I think for me, anytime that I'm down, I love to send cards out to people that I know are probably likewise feeling the same way. And so sometimes when we are in the thick of it, to reach out and help other people, it's a blessing to the recipient, but it's a blessing to us, as well. So I would say to people, to make your child's or loved one's favorite meal at the holidays, send out cards to people that also went through a loss and would be having a difficult time right now. The other thing that we have done is we found Aimee and I were big into horse training. And so last year, 2 years ago, I guess, we found a place where they help children, and they just started behavioral children, and they just started an equestrian center there. And we packed up all of Aimee's things, kept a few little things, but we packed it up because Aimee was such a giver, and we knew that this is what she'd want us to do. So we had, boxes full of horse training things, saddles and saddle pads and all kinds of things. And we drove it to this equestrian place and we donated it in Aimee's name. And, they gave us a certificate, with Aimee's name on it. And that was just really amazing. I think a real healing, actually. We drove away and we were bawling from doing that. We just saw that even though Aimee's not here, she just blessed somebody that, they never met her and she never, met them. But just giving, and it doesn't have to be exactly maybe from your whatever your child owned, but whether it's just a gift to give in your child's name or your loved one's name, I think could really be a blessing and just bring your child or your loved one back into, the holiday spirit.
Lori's always been very good at making Aimee real and relevant today in our lives. And I struggled a lot with that because it was literally a year before I could even say Aimee's name. So those people listening that are struggling, it's okay. It's okay. There's no wrong way to grieve. There are some destructive ways to grieve, but you need to do it the way you need to grieve. What I would say is that one of the things we did was Lori put a Christmas tree up in the barn, and we put the word out to all of our friends that we were going to make it just Aimee's Christmas tree. And we just wanted people to give us an ornament that reminded them of Aimee. And to this day, 7 years later, we will do some Christmas tree in our house and put those ornaments, and people still even send us ornaments. It made it real. And as I said, Lori's really good at that. It was harder for me, but like when we donated the things she talked about, that was really painful for me. But sometimes you need to do the painful things. You need to lean into that pain, and it will help you eventually. And so I just want to encourage people that, there's no getting over losing your daughter, but you can learn to get through life with it. You can move forward. You can be excited again. You can laugh again. Lori and I used to worry about laughing because it was almost like we lost our daughter. Why should we have a right to laugh, or have positive thoughts? But those will come back, and you will have life again.
You will have life again. And there's no getting over it, but there is learning to get through it. Those are profound words. Can you leave our listeners maybe with one or two more of the principles you've learned through your suffering and losing Aimee? Just a couple with pieces of hope as we wrap up today.
I think something that is important to keep in mind is that your grief is your own journey. It's your own story. Some people might, make it look very graceful and like it's a very easy thing to do, and you're kind of comparing your grief to theirs. It's your own story, but it doesn't mean you have to walk it alone. Find the people that will listen to your stories. I think we told the same stories of Aimee over and over again, and we had an amazing group of friends that would just listen and be very patient. And so it's important to find, what I would kind of call my safe circle of friends, the people that would listen to me and my same stories over and over, not be bothered by my tears. That's important. Don't rush through grief. There's no timeline. Grief doesn't know a timeline. It's not a race. It's a journey of love and remembrance for the one that we lost. And they can't physically be, here with us anymore, but they could be loved and still remembered, of course. I think the biggest thing for our marriage that was so helpful to me was to communicate. That's big, because there are times that Stan I would assume a lot. And if he came in and he was a little edgy or kind of like in a bad mood or not really answering me, I would think it was because he was mad at me or didn't like something I did or said. And so I would assume that he was upset at me. And so what we learned in counseling is to not assume, but to actually be honest with your partner and say, I'm a little edgy today because I'm really having a hard time with grief. It's as simple as that. Just be honest, just say it. And then as soon as he would say that, I would know I'm going to back off and just let him walk through whatever he needs to walk through. Sometimes, especially this time of year, we have triggers that hit us, and we could walk out the door smiling and laughing, and then there's that trigger, and it can totally change our mode. And so I think just to make sure you communicate to your partner that this is a difficult time of year. This is a difficult week for me or a difficult day. Just if you could have patience with me, I'd really appreciate that. And then to follow up with, how can I help you? And sometimes it's just, I really, I really just need to be by myself, just to be in my own head and to think. And sometimes, it might be, I just need you to pray with me or sit down or just give me a hug. But it's really important to ask those questions and to be honest where you are with your grief.
And I would say my number one thing would be don't give up. You're not going crazy. It's normal. It's the most normal, abnormal thing anybody ever goes through. Keep trying. Don't give up. And the other thing would be to adapt. Lori is a different person than the person I married. I'm a different person than the person she married. We still love each other with a very deep, caring love, but we have to learn to adapt to those changes. We didn't make it happen. It happened. We drove up on it. And that's what we have to walk through in life is, how do we have joy? How do we have hope? How do we get excited again about things in life? And you'll get there if you don't give up and if you learn to adapt to those changes.
Profound words that only, I think, those who have journeyed your journey can say. And it brings enormous hope to all those who are listening. I just hope that wherever you're at and whatever you're going through during this season, that you're hearing at least one piece that's speaking right to you. Stan and Lori, how do people find you? Tell us a little bit about your ministry and if they wanted to reach out to you and participate or even just thank you. Tell us a little bit about what you two are up to and helping other parents with their grief.
So one of the things that we are about is just helping to restore marriages, to help rekindle hope, communication, faith, and love after the loss of a child, because all those things it's easy for them to go, by the wayside. So we have couples over to, just to give them support. Once a week we'll do meetings. And with COVID right now, that's a little tricky. So one of the things that we were going to say is if there's people that, want to be a part of that support, couples that want to be a part of that support and want to email us, Stan will give you that information, email us, then we could actually put together a Zoom meeting with a few other couples and be able to talk through some of these things, especially the grieving through the holidays. I know it's so very tough to not have your child physically there with you. Very tough time of year, and so we would love to be able to help with that, and would be happy to do a Zoom meet.
Currently, if they want to contact us, they can. Oh, first of all, let me say we're not counselors. We're just people that have experienced that pain. We would like to be like a mentor, just to. We found it so refreshing when someone else who had lost a child was across the room from us looking at us, and we could see in them they've experienced that grief and they're okay. They're working on being okay. So anyway, a way to get a hold of us is Hope for Grief, all spelled out, not the number 4, but the word for FOR, Hope for Grief at gmail.com, or they can call 541-505-6204. We've started a Facebook page, and we do have a plan and a goal for what we'd like to do, and we see it coming to fruition here over time. And we just like to be helpful to people that are going through that kind of pain, even if it's just to talk to someone else who's been there.
Which is an enormous help during times of grief, to talk to somebody who really gets it and who can just listen like you and like you both. So thank you. We'll put that information in the show notes as well. And again, you're always welcome to reach out to livingwholehearted.com and check out our resources there. We're happy to connect you if there's any specific needs that you have. But otherwise, during this holiday time, if you're grieving or you know someone you're grieving, lean in. Don't pull away, but lean into the one who knows you, loves you, and is with you in the midst of this suffering. And to find your safe people, like Lori said, just a couple people who can hang in the trenches with you during this season. So thank you, Stan and Lori, for just being so honest and real and sharing your story with us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.